Do you know how hard it is to make a Jennifer Lopez rom-com and the internet just don't care? People didn't hate it, people didn't love it either. Just, yeah, that happened. That's like Gordon Ramsay opening a restaurant and the reviews are just, the chairs are comfortable. That's an emotional crime. Because Netflix somehow looked at Jennifer Lopez on the queens of 2000 romantic comedies, paired her with Brad Goldstein, the guy who literally co-created one of the TV's most beloved modern comedies, and somehow produced a movie where the biggest conversation wasn't the romance. It was a childbirth scene. Yep, welcome to Office Romance. Jennifer Lopez plays the Jackie Cruz, the CEO of an airline company. She's powerful, she's successful, and she has on very strict company policy. No workplace relationship. Which is like telling school kids not to press the big red button on the school bus. Because if there's one thing movies love, it's making CEOs create problems that's specifically designed for themselves. And enter Brad Goldstein, a charming British lawyer. And before either of them can finish saying, "We remain professional," Cupid had already filed the paperwork. Here's what confuses me. This movie had ingredients. Real ingredients. Jennifer Lopez wasn't just steering, she was producing it too. Which usually means she had believed in this project enough to help steer it. Then you got Brad Goldstein. He also didn't just act in it. He actually wrote the screenplay with Joy Colley. And according to interviews, Jennifer Lopez was the inspiration from the very beginning. So this wasn't a situation where they wrote a script, then 6 months later someone went, "Hey, what if JLo does it?" Nope. She was literally the plan, which somehow makes what happened even stranger. It's like spending years of designing the perfect wedding, then forgetting to invite the groom. Now, the critic didn't exactly declare on this movie, but they definitely showed up armed. The Guardian basically argued that Jennifer Lopez's return to rom-com felt too much hard work. They criticized the chemistry, the forced raunchiness, and said the mix of British and American comedy never really clicked. Meanwhile, New York Times Post had its own complaint. The argument was basically, this feels like another attempt to recreate JLo's early 2000 rom-com magic, which is a surprisingly brutal thing to say. But here is where it gets interesting. Not everyone hated it, some reviewers basically went, "You know what? I had fun." Some reviews praised it for being funny enough, romantic enough, and breezy enough. Because it wasn't pretending to reinvent cinema, it was just wanted to be a comfy rom-com. And honestly, that's a fair argument. Not every movie had to be The Godfather. Sometimes you just want attractive people making questionable life choices for 2 hours. Modern cinema comes in many forms. Then I opened Reddit, which is always a dangerous life decision. Of course, some people in Reddit was also enjoying it, but then the other side showed up. And they had notes. Lots of notes. No chemist trying to be hard. The childbirth scene was unnecessary. I'm sorry, that what scene? Because going into a movie called Office Romance, I expected awkward flirting, coffee meetings, passive-aggressive emails, maybe somebody accidentally sends a heart emoji to a company-wide Slack. But I didn't expect the audience to leave talking about a childbirth. That's like advertising a cookie show and everyone spends the next week discussing about the microwave. Something had gone dramatically off rails. However, have you recently fallen in love with a coworker? Don't worry, our sponsor will help you on that. This portion of the video is sponsored by Human Resource, in short, HR. HR would love to hear about your problem. Not because they're happy for you, because they're updating your employment paperwork. Human Resource, turning romantic tension into mandatory training since forever. Anyway, back to the movie. So here's the funniest part of the entire story. When Netflix marketed Office Romance, a lot of people saw the big, shiny R rating in the image and immediately thought, oh, so this is gonna be spicy. You know, a proper grown-up rom-com, steamy romance, bold scenes. And then people actually watched the movie and realized the R was morely came from saying bad words every 14 seconds, some crude jokes, and the infamous childbirth sequence everyone kept mentioning. That's like buying extra spicy noodles and discovering someone just dumped black pepper on them. Technically, yes. Emotionally, absolutely not. Even the director, Ol Parker, basically explained that the movie is much more about romantic tension than explicit bing-bong, which somehow makes the marketing even funnier. Netflix advertised a sports car and then handed them a very comfortable sedan. Yep, it will still get you there, just differently. But here is where this stops being about one movie and start becoming about an entire genre. Because The Office Romance wasn't supposed to be just another Jennifer Lopez movie. It was kind of a test by Hollywood that Can the classic star-powered romantic comedy still work in 2026? Because back in early 2000, rom-com basically owned Hollywood. Jennifer Lopez had hits like Made in Manhattan. Every month there was another movie where two incredibly attractive people hated each other for 90 minutes before kissing in the rain. Society was thriving. Then, somewhere along the way, superhero movies took over, and rom-com quietly packed their bags and moved to Netflix. Now rom-com is competing against literally everything. The competition is ridiculous. So if you're making a rom-com today, being pretty good isn't enough anymore. You have to give people a reason to stop scrolling. And unfortunately, this is where every conversation about office romance ends up. Because romance movies can survive a predictable story, they can survive cheesy dialogue, sometimes they can even survive questionable jokes. But if the audience doesn't believe these two people actually belong together, then the whole thing starts wobbling. And that's exactly why every review felt so split. So naturally, I began my extremely serious investigation. And the suspects were maybe Netflix secretly cancelled half of the movie, maybe aliens removed the chemistry, or maybe Jennifer Lopez and Brad Goldstein secretly hated each other. All of these were internet rumors. None have credible evidence. We are throwing that straight into the gossip recycle bins. See? Responsible journalism. So, did office romance save romantic comedies? Not really. Did they destroy them? Also, maybe not. It mostly became something much more stranger. It's a movie where everyone almost agrees on the ingredients, but nobody agrees on the recipe. Some people got extremely cozy Netflix rom-com they wanted, others saw a movie trying so hard to feel modern. For a movie really called Office Romance, the biggest relationship problem was between the audience expectations and reality. However, if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button because Hollywood keeps making fascinating decisions and apparently it's my full-time job to emotionally process that. Also, whoever approved the title Office Romance, I have a question. It sounds less like a movie and more like a mandatory workflex ethic video you accidentally clicked during employee onboarding. Congratulations, you failed the HR compliance quiz. Good luck at your next job.